So today we have more time left. So I am going to talk about another very important thing. That is something that we have already discussed earlier. And it's very important to understand that. Because there have been, we spoke about the Paticca Samuppada. And there have been a lot of people who have been sending email messages asking questions about this Paticca Samuppada. Because I have been translating some of these words in a different way, which is different from the common translation and also different from the way the common explanation of Paticca Samuppada. So the Paticca Samuppada is very important to understand. But the problem that people have is people are normally thinking in the wrong way from a Buddhist way of thinking. You have heard there is a word that people use that is called Abhidhamma. So the word Abhidharma, and there is the other word Dhamma. So what is the difference between Dhamma and Abhidhamma? We have to understand that. Dhamma is simply the word Dhamma really refers to an idea, a notion, a belief, an opinion. That is the meaning of Dhamma. Abhidhamma is a knowledge or knowing or opinion which is of a higher level. Abhi means higher. Now in talking about the Paticca Samuppada, I have been using a word called a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift was the two ways of looking at the same thing. So that paradigm shift really means that you are seeing in a different way. Now, because of this difficulty in understanding this, I have to point out that today in philosophy, when people talk about modern Western thinking, philosophy, there are words that they use. And the words that they use very important to know that some of you, I think, have studied science. And if you have studied science, the modern scientific way of thinking is based on an assumption. That assumption is, when I see this cup here, I believe that there is a cup here. That is what is called existence. I believe that a cup exists here. That it is existing. And that is what physics is dealing with. Physics is dealing with what is called matter and energy. There are two things that they talk about. Matter, this is made of matter. So the table is made of matter. This chair is made of matter, or the bottle is made of matter, or whatever is, your body is also made of matter. You see, that matter, we believe, exists. Matter is existing. And they are also thinking of another thing called energy. And the energy is also supposed to be existing. So that kind of thinking is what we call existential thinking. That means you are thinking of existence. Do you understand? Now, the philosophers, they have another way of thinking. Now, these scientists are using what is called existential thinking. They are talking about things that exist. But the philosophers begin to ask, is there a thing called existence? Now here I am going to read the passage from a book on philosophy, because they are talking about this. They say, do you sometimes ask, what is reality and what is mere appearance? So two things that they are talking about, a thing called reality and another thing called appearance. That means to think that there is a cup here, the cup is a reality. Now the philosopher says, is it really true that it is there? Is it only an appearance? You understand? Now to question like that, that is called metaphysical thinking. So to assume that it is real is realistic thinking, or maybe you call it physical thinking. You are thinking of a physical thing. But if you question whether it is really true, is it really there? Then you are using metaphysical thinking. You see, that's very interesting to know. Is this material thing, this rock, real? Is the world of physical things real? The world in which there are cows grazing silently in a green field under a bright blue summer sky? Are the city streets real? The shops and office buildings, the lines of cars and buses, the people crowding the sidewalks, the huge metal planes whizzing through grey cloud banks overhead, is the real only what is physical, material, tangible? Is reality only particles of matter in meaningless motion, ending in death, the death of the individual person, and in the vast death of the solar system? Or is all this physical reality only the surface, only what appears to the senses? Because how do we know that it is there? The only way I know is because of my eyes. I can see it. Or if there is a sound, I can hear it. Or if there is a smell, I can smell that. Or if I can put my tongue there, then I can taste. Or if I touch with my hand, I can hold it and touch it. So it is through my five senses that I am able to see that it is there. But is that true? That's the question. So the philosophers begin to ask questions like that. So when they ask, or is this physical reality only the surface, only what appears to the senses, only an illusion after all? Is reality to be found elsewhere, in the world of the mind, in eternal truths such as the golden rule, or in the wisdom and purpose of God? You see, there is a question like that. And what about your own reality? Are you only a body, a material organism which avoids pain and seeks pleasure, a collection of atoms programmed to grow, to mature, and to self-destruct, a product of the genetic material you inherited from the past, and a product of the environment in which you have lived? But if you refuse to regard yourself as a material body, then what kind of reality do you have? Does your reality consist in your being a mind or a soul? But what kind of reality is that? And how can a mind or a soul inhabit a material body as a ghost? Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy which asks these questions about reality. What is appearance and what is real? What kind of reality does the universe have? You see, that is not the normal way of thinking. So when you ask that question, it's a different way of thinking. That is what is called metaphysics. Mind or matter, or is it some kind of spiritual being? What kind of reality do you have as a human being? These are the questions that metaphysics asks. So that metaphysical thinking is what is called Abhidharma. That word Abhidharma is about that kind of thinking. So it is only by beginning to understand it that way and question that way that you begin to talk about the Paticca Samuppada. The Paticca Samuppada is based on what is called metaphysical thinking. That is the important thing to understand. Most people, they try to get into the ordinary physical thinking and begin to ask questions about Paticca Samuppada. So they can't understand it. This is why some people ask questions and we can't try to answer them. They are thinking in a different way. So it is important for us to understand that Paticca Samuppada is questioning the reality of existence. Now here there is another part of this. Do you sometimes ask, what can we know? Is there any truth that we can believe? Is a statement true only if it is based on what your senses tell you, on what you can see or touch? But is there any guarantee that what we observe by our sense can establish truth about the world? In truth eternal and absolute, as some philosophies and all the great religions say, or can truth be subject to change? The sciences, which are largely based on observations by the senses, are constantly changing, revising themselves, contradicting themselves, producing more and more numbers, charts and computer printouts, and more experimentation with electrons and rats. Is science true? Or shall we turn for truth to the great religions of the Judeo-Christian tradition, or at the great philosophies of the Western world? The defenders of science sneer at both religion and philosophy in their claims to truth and insist that there is no other truth than what science provides. As for the religions and philosophies, they not only are attacked and condemned by the defenders of science, but they also attack each other. Do you then ask, what can we know? What is truth? These are the questions that philosophy also asks. Theory of knowledge or epistemology asks, what is mere opinion and what is truth? Does true knowledge have its source in observation by the senses, or in human reason, in supernatural being? Is truth fixed, eternal, absolute, or is truth changing and relative? Are there limits to what we can know? These are the questions of the branch of philosophy called theory of knowledge or epistemology. So the important thing to understand here is that when we talk about the Paticca Samuppada and the teachings of the Buddha is dealing with this problem. Now it's very important to understand that. How? We have to first understand that when we are born with a body. That's all that we have. We are born with a body. And in this body, there are 5 senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the whole body, the sense of touch. That is all that we have. So with the eye we see things, hear with the ears, smell with the nose, taste with the tongue, and touch with the body. And from that, we come to conclusions. That's all. So this is why when we study Western philosophy, at the beginning they were talking about thinking. So it is by thinking that we can understand whatever we, not only just seeing, we have to think properly. Now the thinking becomes important. But that was during a certain beginning of philosophy. Then came another kind of philosopher. When science began, they started saying, thinking is not the way to understand. You can only see, hear, smell, taste, touch. We don't have a thing called mind. We have only a body. And therefore, there is no such thing as mind. That's what a certain philosopher from England, who was that? Yeah. He said, there is no such thing as mind. We have only a body. And so he wrote books on this. Locke, and then there was another philosopher. He was a Catholic priest. He didn't like that idea. He said, no, it's not correct. Everything depends on our thinking. It's not only just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. It's only by thinking that we begin to understand things. And only thinking. And therefore we have only a mind. Even when you talk about a body, that is also a creation of the mind. It's not a creation of anything else. So he said there is only mind, no body. So then a problem came up. People normally, they are not very much people who like to think. They want to get other people to do the thinking, and they are only just wanting to believe. So they were puzzled. Am I going to believe the one philosopher who said there is no mind? Or am I going to believe the other man who said there is only mind, there is no body? Then another man came. Now, Locke came from England. The other man was Berkeley. He came from Ireland. The other man came from Scotland. Hume. He said, you are both wrong. There is no mind, there is no matter. There is only seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And that is what is called experience. There is only experience. So you see, different philosophers began to think in different ways. And ultimately, although this happened in what is called the United Kingdom, which is England, Scotland and Ireland. But there were other philosophers somewhere in Germany, somewhere in Europe. They said, there was this Immanuel Kant who said that is not correct. We can't say there is no such thing. And he coined two words called the phenomenon and the noumenon. So what he called the phenomenon is what you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch is the phenomenon, and noumenon is something that we cannot really see, hear, smell, taste, touch. We can only think about it and get it. It's only a product of thinking. And then of course there were other philosophers like Bertrand Russell and Wittgenstein and people like that who came up and said, we cannot accept just what you think, and you have to be able to experience it through the senses. So only what we can experience through the senses that we can accept as real. And then they are the people who started saying there is no such thing as truth. We can only talk about meaningful statements and meaningless statements. So like that, so it's only a meaningful statement if it is based on something you can see or hear or smell or taste or touch. If it is not based on anything like that, then it is a meaningless statement. So that means even the idea of God, which no one has seen or heard, is a meaningless statement. So, like that, then there another philosopher came up and said, no, it's not, there is nothing that we can call truth. The only thing that we can talk about are problems and their solutions. So whatever solution someone suggests, it can be verified, whether it solves the problem or not. If it solves the problem, it can be accepted. If it doesn't solve the problem, it is not accepted. So like that, the idea of truth also disappeared, and then came the problem and the solution. And then, of course, another kind of philosopher came and said, there is only one problem to be solved. All other problems are just useless things they talk about. The only problem that has to be solved is that all human beings think that they exist. And they are also aware that they are going to die. That is the biggest problem. No one likes to die. Everyone wants to exist. And so, ultimately, they came to the problem that the Buddha was talking about. That is the problem of life. And ultimately, no one was able to solve that problem of life, because no one could find a solution to stop death. So it was the Buddha who ultimately solved this problem. How did he solve it? He pointed out that these people who said, I exist, that is a mistake. That is a delusion. The idea of existence itself is a delusion. Even to say this cup exists is a delusion. And therefore, if you don't exist, how can you die? Before you die, you have to exist. So that means the problem is automatically solved when you understand that existence itself is a delusion. Only problem is that people are thinking that they exist. That's the only problem. And how this idea of existence comes is explained in what we call the Paticca Samuppada. So Paticca Samuppada is an explanation of how the world is created and how yourself is created. It is created by the way we think. That is the meaning of Paticca Samuppada. Now, all these people who talk about religion, they always talk about creation. God created the world and all kinds of things. But here the Buddha is talking about creation, but not the creation of God. Your own mind is creating the world. It is your way of thinking. And that is the meaning of the Paticca Samuppada. And you are creating in total ignorance. You start with total ignorance. You know nothing. What really happens is, when you open your eyes, you see. That's all that you can see. When you open your eyes, you see. And that is the most important out of all the senses, seeing. And when you see, what is it that you see? That is important to understand. When you open your eyes, now according to modern scientific thinking, you see only when there is light. If there is no light, you don't see anything. So light is an electromagnetic wave that comes to your eye. and then you begin to see. And when you see, what do you see? The light comes in certain frequencies, and one frequency is received by a nerve ending, and that is what you see is a color. There are only 7 colors that you can see. They are violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. That is what you call rainbow colors. So you see only these rainbow colors. And when you see white, it is really a mixture of all the colors. And if you don't see, it is dark, means no light is coming. So the important thing is to understand that what you see is only color. And when you see colors, some colors you like, some you don't like. Some there is no special liking or disliking. So in other words, there are these 3 feelings: good, bad and neutral. So that is the feeling. So the feeling makes you feel, and you see the light. And it is when you look at something, what you see is simply the colors, and it is out of the colors that you create a picture. So when you see colors, what you begin to see is a picture that is constructed out of colors. So there is the color, then whether you like it or dislike it, which is Vedana. The color is called Sanya, Vedana, and the construction is Sankhara, and you create the image. The image that you create is what is called Rupa. Rupa means the image. So what we call Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara. And the result of that is you identify the picture as this is a face, or this is a flower, or this is a tree, this is a leaf. So whatever you identify, that identification is vijnana. That is what is called perception. Perception is what is called vijnana. So from a complete state of ignorance of knowing, not knowing anything, you begin the construction and then you see a picture. And then you name the picture and say, this is a flower, or this is a face, or this is a tree, or this is an animal. All that is your labeling, what you saw. So that is the meaning of Sankhara Paccha Vijnanam, or Vijnana Paccha Nama Rupam. So those words mean that you are creating the image. And then that was only about what you do with your eyes. But now we have to talk about the other senses also. You begin to see, hear, smell, taste, touch. You put all the senses together and you create an object. You are not only creating a picture, you are creating an object. That creation of the object means you bring the object into existence. The object has come into existence through your creation. So, that is called phassa. Phassa really, usually people call it contact. Phassa is not contact. Phassa is a full construction of an object. The object has been constructed, then you begin to, the feeling comes, and it is either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, and then you begin to react to the feeling in the form of desire for the pleasant, hatred of the unpleasant. On the neutral, you don't desire or hate, but you just let it be, that's all. So it is the neutral feeling that gives the idea of existence. It is existing there. That's all. So you have created three reactions: desire, hatred, and existence. And that reaction, you begin to identify or personalize and say, this reaction is mine. I desire, I hate. The reaction is personalized. It is my desire. Or to personalize it, to say, this is mine. And the moment you have created mine, you have also created the I. Without the I, you cannot have a mind. Then where is the I that you have created? The only I that you can speak of is a thing that you can say occupies space and time. If it occupies space and time, what is it that occupies space and time? It is the body. So it is the body that you get hold of and say, this is myself. So you have created a self by identifying the body as yourself. That is what is called Sakkaya Ditthi. But the moment you have identified the body as yourself, another thing happens. The body is something that occupies space and time. Occupying time means it has a past, a present, and a future. Then the body has a past, a present, and a future. And the past of the body, what is that? Is birth. The future of the body is death. And in between is aging and sickness. You see, so we are not only having a body, we are also having birth, aging, sickness, and death. And that means suffering. We have created suffering. So the suffering is a result of creating a self and making the body the self. You see, we have created the world and the self through this process of perception. It is only when we have fully understood this properly. The problem is that once we have created the world and the self, the emotional reaction is produced, where we begin to form relationships between myself and others and other things. That emotional relationship ties you to this idea of existence. And then you can't get out of it. It is only by learning to first get hold of these emotions and calm down, get rid of the emotional reactions. That is called samadhi. And then only you can understand this properly, and that is what is called panya. Fully understood, then you are free of the idea of existence, of a world and a self. The world and the self disappears, and you don't exist anymore. That is the end of all suffering. I hope you understood that. We have been talking about this many times. So, but we have to be thinking about this constantly. That is how we begin to understand this properly. It's only by understanding that properly that you get out of this suffering.
Go to heaven first.
Let's
go to heaven first.
Yeah. This is the thing. And that is what we call metaphysics, metaphysical thinking. Or it is the same thing as Abhidharma. Abhidharma is metaphysical thinking, not just physical, existential thinking. We have to get out of that existential thinking. So I hope you understood.